Maya had always thought that when people adopted pets, they kept them forever. But looking at the small black dog's file, she realized how wrong she was. This little puppy had been returned to the animal shelter 17 times in just 1 year. 17 different families had taken her home, and 17 times they had brought her back. The reasons were always different. One family said she was too playful. Another complained she didn't like their cat. Some said she barked too much. Others claimed she destroyed their furniture. A few mentioned she wasn't good with their kids. The shelter workers had started calling her the comeback dog because she always ended up back in the same kennel. Maya worked as a veterinary assistant at a clinic nearby. She was 28 years old and had just moved to this new town for her job. Living alone in a small apartment, she hadn't planned on getting a pet. But when she volunteered at the shelter on weekends, this particular dog caught her attention. The dog was hiding in the very back corner of cage number 23. While other dogs jumped up and wagged their tails when people walked by, this one just stayed curled up, watching everyone with sad, tired eyes. Maya noticed something that the previous families must have missed. This wasn't a bad dog acting out on purpose. This was a scared dog who had learned that people always leave. When Maya asked about the dog's history, the shelter coordinator shook her head. "I have to be honest with you," she said. "This one is difficult. Every family thinks they can handle her, but within weeks, sometimes days, they're back here asking us to take her again. Maybe you should look at one of our easier dogs instead." But Maya couldn't stop thinking about those sad eyes. She had grown up feeling unwanted herself, bouncing between relatives after her parents died in a car accident when she was 12. She knew what it felt like to wonder if anyone would ever really want to keep you around. Against everyone's advice, Maya decided to foster the dog for a trial period, just for a few weeks. She told herself, to see how it goes. The shelter staff filled out the paperwork with reluctant expressions. They had seen this story too many times before. Another hopeful person thinking they could fix what 17 other families couldn't handle. They gave Maya a bag of dog food, a cheap leash, and wished her luck in voices that suggested she would need it. The drive home was quiet. The dog sat in the back seat, pressed against the door as far away from Maya as possible. She didn't wag her tail or show any excitement about leaving the shelter. She just stared out the window with those same tired eyes, as if she already knew this was temporary. When they got to Maya's apartment, the dog wouldn't come out of the car at first. Maya had to gently coax her out, speaking in soft tones and moving slowly. The dog followed her up the stairs to the second floor, staying several feet behind. Ready to run if needed. Maya had prepared for this moment. She had bought a dog bed, some toys, food and water bowls, and had puppy-proofed her small apartment. She showed the dog around, pointing out where her food would be, where she could sleep, and which toys were hers to play with. For the first few hours, everything seemed okay. The dog explored the apartment cautiously, sniffed around, and even ate a little food. Maya started to think maybe this wouldn't be as hard as everyone had warned her. Then night came. As soon as Maya turned off the lights and went to her bedroom, chaos began. The dog started howling, a heartbreaking sound that echoed through the thin apartment walls. When Maya came out to check on her, she found her favorite pair of shoes completely destroyed, the stuffing scattered across the living room floor. The howling continued all night. By morning, Maya discovered accidents throughout the apartment. Despite having taken the dog outside several times, her neighbors were already complaining about the noise, and her landlord called before she even left for work. "If this continues," he said in a stern voice, "you need to find somewhere else to live." Maya cleaned up the mess, replaced her shoes, and went to work exhausted. Her colleagues asked how the first night went, and she tried to smile and say it was fine. But inside, she was starting to understand why so many families had given up. The second night was worse. The dog somehow managed to pull down curtains, knock over plants, and scratch deep marks into the wooden door trying to get out. The howling was so loud that 3 different neighbors called to complain. Maya found herself sitting on her bathroom Floor at 3 in the morning, scrubbing up another accident while the dog trembled behind the toilet, looking at her with eyes that seemed to say, "I know you're going to leave me too." At that moment, Maya realized something important. This wasn't a bad dog. This was a broken dog. Every time she had been returned to the shelter, it had confirmed what she believed about herself, that she wasn't worth keeping. The destructive behavior wasn't meanness or stupidity. It was pure anxiety and fear. The dog had learned that humans make promises they don't keep, that love has conditions, that when you get too comfortable, when you start to hope that maybe this time will be different, they pack you up and take you back to the concrete kennel where you started. Maya looked at this trembling, scared animal and saw herself at 12 years old, being told by another relative that they couldn't handle her anymore. She remembered the feeling of carrying her few belongings in a plastic bag, wondering what was wrong with her that made her so hard to love. Right there on the bathroom floor, surrounded by cleaning supplies and puppy training pads, Maya made a decision. She wasn't going to be the 18th family to give up. She was going to be the first family to stay, no matter how hard it got. The next morning, she called in sick to work and spent the entire day researching dog anxiety, trauma and rescue animals, and positive training methods. She watched videos, read articles, and even called a professional dog trainer for advice. What you're dealing with is pretty common in dogs who have been returned multiple times, the trainer explained. She's not trying to be difficult. She's trying to protect herself from getting attached again. The destructive behavior usually gets worse before it gets better because she's testing you. She wants to see if you'll abandon her like everyone else did. That evening, instead of leaving the dog alone in the living room, Maya brought her bed into the bedroom. Instead of getting frustrated with the accidents, she simply cleaned them up without making a big deal about it. Instead of scolding the destructive behavior, she started giving the dog puzzle toys and activities to keep her mind busy. It wasn't easy. Maya's apartment looked like a tornado had hit it most days. Her sleep schedule was completely disrupted. Her social life disappeared because she couldn't leave the dog alone without major destruction happening. Her savings account took a hit from replacing damaged items and paying for training supplies. But something small started to change. The dog began watching Maya more carefully, as if trying to figure out when the abandonment would come. When it didn't come after a week, then 2 weeks, then a month, the dog's behavior started to shift in tiny ways. She stopped hiding behind the toilet when Maya came home from work. She started eating her food more regularly. The accidents became less frequent. The howling turned into whimpering, then eventually stopped altogether. The real breakthrough came when Maya noticed the dog had started following her from room to room, always staying about 6 feet away, but never letting Maya completely out of sight. It was as if she was saying, "I don't trust you yet, but I'm not ready to give up hope either." Maya realized that this scared, damaged dog was teaching her something important about patience, commitment, and what it really means to love someone unconditionally. Both of them were learning that sometimes the most worthwhile relationships are the ones that require the most work to build. Maya knew she needed to understand what had gone wrong so many times before. She couldn't keep cleaning up messes and hoping things would magically get better. So she started digging into the dog's past, trying to piece together the story that had led to 17 failed adoptions. The shelter staff were hesitant at first to share too many details. They had seen too many people get overwhelmed and give up when they learned the full truth. But Maya kept asking questions, and slowly, the heartbreaking story began to unfold. The dog had been born right there at the shelter. Her mother was a stray who had been hit by a car when the puppies were only 3 weeks old. The mother didn't survive, leaving behind 4 tiny puppies who weren't old enough to eat solid food yet. The shelter volunteers had to bottle feed them round the clock. But it wasn't the same as having a real mother. Most puppies learn everything from their moms, explained Jana, one of the longtime volunteers. How to play nicely, how to handle being alone, how to trust that their family will come back. These little ones never got that foundation. They were essentially orphaned before they could learn how the world works. Maya learned that the dog's 3 siblings had all been adopted successfully, but they had shown their anxiety in different ways. One became overly clingy, following his new family everywhere. Another became aggressive with food, guarding her bowl like someone might take it away. The third one was extremely shy and took months to warm up to people. But Maya's dog had developed the most challenging response of all. She had learned to push people away before they could leave her. It was like she was saying, "I'll ruin this first, so it won't hurt as much when you give up on me." As Maya dug deeper into the adoption records, she discovered a disturbing pattern. Each family had the same basic story. They would take the dog home, expecting a grateful, well-behaved pet who would immediately fit into their lives. When that didn't happen, they would return her within days or weeks. The first family had kept her for only 4 days. They complained that she cried too much and wasn't house-trained yet. The second family lasted 2 weeks before deciding she was too much work for their busy lifestyle. A young couple returned her after she chewed up their expensive couch cushions. A family with small children brought her back because she was too energetic and knocked over their toddler while playing. The longest anyone had kept her was 6 weeks. An elderly man named Robert had tried his best, but at 75 years old, he simply couldn't keep up with a young dog who needed constant attention and exercise. He had been heartbroken to return her, telling the shelter staff that he felt like he was failing her. But he worried about what would happen if he fell. While trying to chase her around his yard, each return had made things worse. The dog learned that when humans started packing up her toys and putting her in a car, it meant going back to the concrete kennel where she had started. She began to associate any kind of change or disruption with abandonment. Maya talked to Dr. Williams, the veterinarian who had examined the dog during several of her returns to the shelter. "What you have to understand," he explained, "is that each rejection reinforced her belief that she was unwanted. Dogs are incredibly smart about reading human emotions. She could sense when families were getting frustrated or impatient with her, and that just made her anxiety worse. The pattern was always the same. Families would adopt her thinking they were getting a cute, grateful pet. They expected her to immediately understand house rules, sleep quietly through the night, and behave perfectly while they were at work. When she didn't live up to these unrealistic expectations, they would label her as broken or difficult and return her to the shelter. Nobody had taken the time to understand that her destructive behavior was actually a cry for help. When she chewed shoes, she wasn't being spiteful. She was trying to comfort herself with something that smelled like her. Human. When she had accidents in the house, it wasn't because she didn't know better. It was because her anxiety was so high that she couldn't control her body's responses. When she howled at night, she wasn't trying to annoy the neighbors. She was expressing the deep fear that she had been abandoned again. Maya realized that all of these families had treated the dog like a product they could return to the store when it didn't work the way they expected. They wanted instant gratification, a picture-perfect pet for their social media posts, without putting in any real effort to understand what the dog needed. Working with a local animal behaviorist named Dr. Chen, Maya began to implement a completely different approach. Instead of expecting the dog to adapt to Maya's schedule, Maya adjusted her entire routine around the dog's needs. She established consistent meal times, daily walks at the same hours, and predictable interactions that wouldn't suddenly disappear. The behaviorist explained that dogs who have been repeatedly abandoned often develop something called learned helplessness. They stop trying to please people because nothing they do seems to make humans stay. The key was to rebuild the dog's confidence. By showing her that good behavior actually did lead to positive outcomes, Maya learned that the dog's most destructive episodes always happened when she was about to leave the apartment. The dog had learned to recognize the signs, Maya putting on her work shoes, grabbing her keys, picking up her purse, and would immediately go into panic mode. Her body would flood with stress hormones, making it impossible for her to think clearly or control her behavior. The breakthrough moment came when Maya realized what the dog was really trying to communicate. Every morning before Maya left for work, the dog would pick up her favorite toy, old tennis ball that was falling apart and bring it to the front door. At first, Maya thought the dog wanted to play, but then she understood something heartbreaking. The dog was offering her most precious possession as a gift, hoping it would convince Maya to stay. It was like she was saying, "Here, take my most valuable thing. Please don't leave me like everyone else did." Maya sat down on her living room floor and watched this daily ritual with new eyes. The dog would carefully carry the tennis ball in her mouth, place it gently by Maya's feet, then sit back and look up at her with hopeful eyes. When Maya still left for work, the dog's face would fall, and she would carry the ball back to her bed, knowing that once again, her offering hadn't been enough to make someone stay. Understanding this changed everything for Maya. She realized that the dog wasn't being difficult or trying to make her life harder. She was a traumatized animal desperately trying to figure out how to make humans love her enough to stay. Every family that had returned her had taken away another piece of her faith in the possibility of being truly wanted. Maya began to see her own childhood reflected in the dog's behavior. The constant fear of being too much trouble, the desperate attempts to be perfect, the crushing disappointment when it wasn't enough. The dog had learned the same painful lesson Maya had learned as a child, that love was conditional, temporary, and could be taken away at any moment. But Maya was determined to teach her something different. She was going to show this dog that some promises are kept, some people do stay, and that being imperfect doesn't make you unworthy of love. It would take time, patience, and a complete change in how both of them thought about what family really means. Understanding what was wrong was only the beginning. Maya realized she needed to completely change how she approached living with this traumatized dog. It wasn't going to be a quick fix or something that would happen overnight. She was basically starting from scratch with an animal who had learned that humans couldn't be trusted. The first major change Maya made was bringing the dog to work with her at the veterinary clinic. Dr. Rodriguez, her boss, wasn't thrilled about the idea at first. "We can't have a disruptive animal in here while we're trying to treat other pets," he said. But Maya explained the situation, and after seeing how calm the dog became when she could stay close to Maya all day, he agreed to let it continue. Having the dog at work turned out to be a game changer. Instead of spending 8 hours alone in the apartment, wondering if Maya was coming back, the dog could see her throughout the day. She would lie quietly in the corner of the exam rooms, watching Maya work with other animals. It was like she was finally learning that when Maya left her sight, it didn't mean Maya was leaving forever. Something unexpected started happening at the clinic. The dog seemed to have a natural instinct for comforting other scared animals. When nervous cats came in for checkups, she would lie down nearby, showing them through her calm body language that this place was safe. When injured dogs arrived, she would approach slowly and gently touch noses with them, as if sharing some kind of secret understanding about pain and healing. Dr. Rodriguez started noticing these interactions. "She's got something special," he told Maya one afternoon. "It's like she knows exactly what these other animals are feeling. I've never seen anything quite like it." Maya realized that the dog's own trauma had given her an unusual ability to recognize fear and anxiety in others. Having survived so much emotional pain herself, she could spot it instantly in other animals and knew instinctively how to help them feel less alone. The real test of their progress came when Maya's ex-boyfriend Tony showed up unexpectedly one evening. They had dated for 2 years before Maya moved to this town, and he had driven 6 hours to surprise her and tried to work things out between them. The dog had never been around men for long periods, and her reaction to Tony was immediate and intense. She ran under the bed and refused to come out, even when Maya called her name. She wouldn't eat her dinner, had an accident in the bedroom, and spent the entire evening shaking and panting heavily. Tony was not patient with the situation. "This is ridiculous," he said, getting frustrated when the dog wouldn't warm up to him. "Why would you keep such a messed up animal? She's clearly got serious problems. You should just take her back to the shelter and get a normal dog instead." Maya felt her heart sink as she watched the dog's behavior regress to those early days of panic and fear. But she also felt something else rising up inside her, a fierce protectiveness she had never experienced before. That night, as a thunderstorm rolled through town, the dog's anxiety reached new heights. She was trembling uncontrollably, drooling from stress, and trying to hide in the smallest spaces she could find. Tony complained about the noise, about how the dog was ruining their romantic reunion, about how Maya was wasting her life on an animal that would never be normal. Maya spent the night sitting on the bathroom floor with the dog, speaking softly and offering comfort while the thunder crashed outside. As she held this terrified animal who had been failed by so many humans before, Maya realized something important about herself. She had spent most of her adult life trying to please other people, compromising her own needs to make relationships work. She had learned as a child that love came with conditions, that you had to earn your place in people's lives by being convenient and agreeable. But looking at this dog who needed her unconditionally, Maya understood that real love sometimes means choosing the harder path. The next morning, she told Tony that the dog wasn't going anywhere. "If you can't accept that she's part of my life now," Maya said quietly, "then maybe you shouldn't be either." Tony left that afternoon, shaking his head and muttering about how Maya had lost her mind over a damaged animal. As his car pulled out of the parking lot, Maya felt sad about the relationship ending, but also felt a strange sense of relief washing over her. For the first time in her life, she had chosen something vulnerable and needy over something easy and convenient. She had stood up for someone who couldn't stand up for herself, and somehow, making that choice felt like the most important thing she had ever done. The dog seemed to sense that something significant had happened. Over the next few days, her behavior began changing in small but meaningful ways. She started following Maya from room to room, but now she would get closer than before. Instead of staying 6 feet away, she would lie down just 3 feet from Maya's chair. Instead of hiding when visitors came to the door, she would retreat to her bed, but keep watching to see what Maya would do. Most remarkably, she began playing with her toys for the first time since Maya had brought her home. Not just carrying them around or hoarding them, but actually playing, tossing the tennis ball in the air, chasing it around the living room, even bringing it to Maya as if inviting her to join the game. Dr. Rodriguez noticed the change immediately. When they returned to work, "She looks different," he said, watching the dog greet the other staff members with a wagging tail, instead of cowering behind Maya's legs. More confident somehow. Maya realized that the dog had been watching and learning during the confrontation with Tony. She had seen Maya choose her over someone else, defend her when she was being criticized, and refuse to abandon her even when it cost Maya something important. For a dog who had learned that humans always choose the easier option, this was life-changing information. The breakthrough continued over the following weeks. The dog started sleeping at the foot of Maya's bed instead of hiding in the closet. She began eating her meals with enthusiasm instead of nervous gulping. She even started greeting familiar neighbors with cautious tail wags instead of running away. But the most significant change was in how she looked at Maya. The suspicious, guarded expression in her eyes began to soften. She would make eye contact more often, hold it longer, and sometimes Maya could swear she saw something that looked like gratitude in those dark brown eyes. Maya understood that they were both learning the same lesson together. Sometimes the most worthwhile relationships require the most work to build. Sometimes choosing love means choosing difficulty. And sometimes, when you refuse to give up on someone who has every reason to give up on themselves, you discover what you're really made of. The dog was teaching Maya about commitment, patience, and what it really means to love someone unconditionally. In return, Maya was teaching the dog that not all humans leave, not all promises get broken, and that being imperfect doesn't make you unworthy of a forever home. 6 months after bringing the dog home, Maya thought they had overcome the worst of their challenges together. The dog was sleeping peacefully through the night, playing with her toys, and even greeting some visitors with a cautious wag of her tail. Maya had started to believe that maybe, finally, they had turned the corner and life would get easier from here. Then her phone rang at 2 in the morning. It was her brother calling from across the country. Their father had suffered a massive heart attack and was in intensive care at the hospital. The doctors weren't sure if he would make it through the next 48 hours. Maya needed to get on a plane immediately if she wanted to see him again. Maya's first thought was about her father, but her second thought was about the dog sleeping peacefully at the foot of her bed. How could she explain to an animal who had been abandoned 17 times that she had to leave, even temporarily? How could she make the dog understand that this wasn't another abandonment, just a family emergency? The timing couldn't have been worse. The dog had just started showing real signs of trust and security. She had finally stopped bringing her tennis ball to the door every morning, no longer trying to bribe Maya to stay. She had begun to believe that Maya would always come back. Now Maya had to disappear for an unknown amount of time, possibly weeks, to deal with a crisis the dog couldn't possibly understand. Maya called every boarding facility in town, but as soon as they heard about the dog's history and behavioral issues, they all politely declined. We're just not equipped to handle an animal with that level of separation anxiety. One manager explained it wouldn't be fair to her or to our other animals. Her coworkers offered to help, but the dog had never bonded with anyone except Maya. Dr. Rodriguez was kind and patient, but the dog still kept her distance from him at work. Jana from the shelter volunteered to pet sit, but Maya remembered how the dog had reacted to Tony's presence, hiding, refusing to eat, having accidents throughout the house. Dr. Rodriguez pulled Maya aside at work the next day. I hate to suggest this, he said gently, but maybe you should consider boarding her at the shelter temporarily, just until you get back. It's not permanent. You can pick her up as soon as your family situation is resolved. Maya felt sick at the suggestion, even though she knew he meant well. She remembered the look in the dog's eyes during those first few nights, the resignation of an animal who had learned not to hope for better. Taking her back to the shelter, even temporarily, would confirm every fear the dog had about humans. It would tell her that when things get difficult, people choose the easier path. But what choice did Maya have? Her father was dying, and she needed to be there for her family. She couldn't ask her grieving mother to handle everything alone. Yet she also couldn't bear the thought of betraying the trust. It had taken months to build with this traumatized animal. Maya spent hours researching alternatives. Finally, she found a specialized pet travel service that worked with anxious animals. It would be expensive, more money than Maya had in her savings account, and complicated, requiring veterinary certificates, special carriers, and sedation consultations. But it would allow the dog to fly with her across the country. The logistics were a nightmare. Maya had to find pet-friendly accommodations near the hospital, arrange for a rental car that would allow dogs, and coordinate with veterinarians on both coasts to get the proper documentation. She maxed out her credit card paying for the travel service and had to borrow money from her brother to cover the additional expenses. The day of travel was traumatic for both of them. The dog had never been in a car for more than 30 minutes, let alone confined in a travel carrier for hours. Maya could hear her whimpering and panting during the flight, and her heart broke knowing she was putting the dog through this stress. But every time she doubted her decision, she reminded herself of the alternative, returning the dog to the concrete kennel, where this story had started. When they finally arrived at Maya's childhood home, the dog was disoriented and terrified. Nothing smelled familiar, the sounds were all different, and there were strangers everywhere. Maya's mother, her brother, neighbors coming by to offer support. The dog immediately went into survival mode, hiding under furniture and refusing to eat. Maya's family thought she had lost her mind. You brought a dog to a family emergency? Her brother asked incredulously. Mom has enough to worry about without dealing with your pet's problems too. But Maya's mother, exhausted from days of sitting by her husband's bedside, noticed something others missed. When she broke down crying one evening, overwhelmed by the uncertainty and fear, the dog quietly approached her. Without any prompting from Maya, the dog gently rested her head on Maya's mother's lap, offering the same comfort she had learned to give scared animals at the veterinary clinic. She knows, Maya's mother whispered, stroking the dog's soft ears. She understands what it's like to be scared and alone. The 2 weeks that followed were unlike anything Maya had experienced. They spent most days at the hospital, where Maya's father slowly recovered from his surgery. The dog waited patiently in the car during visiting hours, and Maya would check on her every few hours, taking her for walks in the hospital parking lot. In the evenings, they stayed in a pet-friendly motel near the hospital. The dog clearly didn't understand what was happening or why they were in this strange place. But something remarkable occurred during those displaced weeks. Instead of falling apart under the stress of being somewhere unfamiliar, the dog seemed to realize that the important thing wasn't the location, it was being with Maya. She stopped searching for escape routes in their motel room. She began eating her meals normally, even though everything else in her environment had changed. Most significantly, she started following Maya around with a different energy, not the clingy desperation of those early months, but the confident loyalty of a dog who finally understood that they were a team. One night, as Maya sat by her father's hospital bed watching him sleep, she realized what had happened. By choosing to include the dog in this family crisis rather than abandoning her, when things got complicated, Maya had sent a message that couldn't be misunderstood. She wasn't going to disappear when life got difficult. She wasn't going to choose convenience over commitment. The dog had been watching and learning during these stressful weeks. She had seen Maya make countless sacrifices to keep them together, spending money she didn't have, dealing with judgmental comments from family members, managing complex travel arrangements. For a dog who had learned that humans always take the easy way out, this was revolutionary information. When Maya's father finally came home from the hospital, and they prepared to fly back to their own town, the dog's behavior during the return trip was completely different. She still didn't enjoy being in the travel carrier, but she wasn't panicking. She seemed to understand that whatever happened, they would face it together. Back home in their familiar apartment, the dog displayed a confidence that Maya had never seen before. She explored their space with curiosity instead of anxiety, as if seeing it with new eyes. She greeted Dr. Rodriguez and the clinic staff with genuine enthusiasm, tail wagging and body relaxed. She even approached some of the regular clients at the veterinary office, offering her special brand of comfort to nervous pets. But the most significant change was in how she responded to Maya's daily routines. When Maya got ready for work each morning, the dog no longer showed signs of separation anxiety. She had learned during their time away that Maya's departure didn't mean abandonment. She had finally understood that some people keep their promises, even when keeping them is difficult. Maya realized that this crisis had transformed their relationship in ways that months of routine could never have accomplished. By refusing to abandon the dog when it would have been easier to do so, Maya had proven that their bond was stronger than circumstances. The dog had finally learned to trust not just Maya's presence, but Maya's character. A year after Maya had first brought the dog home, she thought their story was finally settled. The dog was thriving at the veterinary clinic, helping comfort other anxious animals. She slept peacefully through thunderstorms, greeted visitors with cautious friendliness, and had stopped showing signs of the severe anxiety that had once controlled her life. Maya had even started thinking about making the arrangement official by completing the adoption paperwork. Then Jonna from the shelter called with news that turned Maya's world upside down. "I have a situation I need to discuss with you," Jonna said carefully. "The Peterson family, the ones who returned Luna about 8 months ago, they want her back." Maya's blood went cold. She had never even known the dog's original name was Luna. In all the paperwork and conversations, everyone had just referred to her as the dog or your foster. Hearing her real name spoken by someone else made Maya realize how little she actually knew about the dog's past. Jeanette continued, "Their circumstances have changed significantly. They moved to a house with a big yard. Their children are older and more responsible now, and honestly, they feel terrible about giving up on her before. They're convinced they can provide a better home for her this time." Maya felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "But she's been with me for a year," she managed to say. "She's finally happy and healthy. Why would you even consider this?" There was a long pause before Jana spoke again. Maya, I need to be honest with you. Technically, you're still listed as a foster parent, not an official adopter. We never completed the final paperwork because we've seen this story before. People think they can handle her, and then they change their minds. The Peterson family has legal priority if they want to reclaim her. Maya spent the rest of that day in a panic. She pulled out every document she had related to the dog, vet records, training certificates, photos showing her progress, even testimonials from neighbors about how well-behaved she had become. She had been documenting everything without realizing it, creating a paper trail that proved how far they had both come together. But more than the paperwork, Maya realized that the dog had changed her too. Before Luna came into her life, Maya had been cautious about forming deep connections with anyone. She had learned as a child that loving someone meant risking losing them. So she had kept most relationships at a safe distance, even her job at the veterinary clinic had been more about helping animals than forming lasting bonds. Luna had taught Maya what it meant to fight for someone you love. Taking care of a traumatized animal had shown Maya her own capacity for patience, commitment, and unconditional love. She had learned to put someone else's needs before her own comfort, to make sacrifices without expecting anything in return, and to see beauty in something that others considered broken. When the Peterson family came to the shelter for what Jana called a reunion visit, Maya brought Luna with her, dreading what might happen. She had spent the previous night barely sleeping, holding Luna close and trying to memorize the feeling of the dog's warm body curled up against her. The Peterson family seemed genuinely different from the people Maya had imagined. They weren't cruel or uncaring. They were just ordinary people who had made a mistake and wanted a chance to fix it. The mother, Carol, had tears in her eyes as she explained how guilty they had felt about returning Luna. We were first-time dog owners. Carol said, we had no idea what we were doing. When she started having accents and chewing things, we panicked. We thought there was something wrong with her that we couldn't fix. But we've learned so much since then. And we have a trainer lined up and everything. Maya watched Luna carefully during this conversation. The dog stayed pressed against Maya's legs, showing none of the excitement that animals usually display when reunited with former families. When Carol tried to call Luna over using treats, in a cheerful voice, Luna moved behind Maya, using her as a shield. The shelter coordinator, who had witnessed hundreds of these reunions over the years, recognized what everyone was seeing. Sometimes animals vote with their feet, she said quietly. Luna is clearly bonded to Maya in a way that goes beyond basic care. David, Carol's husband, seemed to understand this too. She doesn't even remember us, he said sadly. Look at how she trusts Maya. We took her away from her mother as a puppy, failed her when she needed us most. And now she's found someone who actually understands her. Maya felt her heart breaking for this family who genuinely wanted to do right by Luna. But she also felt a fierce protectiveness rising up inside her. She's not the same dog you returned, Maya said firmly. She's learned to trust again. But it took months of patience and consistency. Starting over with new people could undo all of that progress. Carol and David looked at each other, then at Luna, who was still hiding behind Maya despite their encouraging words and offered treats. Their teenage daughter Ashley spoke up for the first time. Mom, look at her. She's scared of us. That's not how a dog should feel about her family. The visiting room fell silent as everyone watched Luna's body language. She wasn't aggressive or angry. She was just clearly choosing Maya over the people who had originally adopted her. Her message was unmistakable. This is my person, and this is where I belong. After 30 minutes of trying to reconnect with Luna, the Peterson family made a decision that surprised everyone. We can see how much she loves you, Carol told Maya, and how much you love her. We made a mistake when we gave up on her, but making another mistake by taking her away from the home, where she's finally happy, that would be even worse. 3 months later, Maya officially adopted Luna, not as a foster placement that could be revoked, but as a permanent family member. The paperwork felt almost ceremonial at that point. They had been each other's family. Since that first night when Maya chose to stay on the bathroom floor instead of giving up, Maya often reflected on how much they had both changed during their time together. Luna still carried some anxiety. She probably always would. Thunderstorms sometimes made her nervous, and she still preferred familiar routines over surprises. But she slept peacefully through the night, played enthusiastically with her toys, and had become the clinic's unofficial therapy dog for other anxious animals. Most importantly, Luna no longer brought her tennis ball to the door when Maya left. For work, she had finally learned that some people always come back. Maya had learned something equally valuable. She discovered that the most meaningful relationships aren't the easiest ones. They're the ones worth fighting for. In teaching Luna that not all humans abandon what they claim to care about, Maya had learned what it meant to be truly committed to another living being. The dog who had been returned by 17 families had finally found her forever home. Not because she became perfect, but because she found someone who understood that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing to stay, especially when staying is difficult. Luna had taught Maya that sometimes the best families are the ones you choose. And sometimes the greatest love stories are about two broken souls helping each other heal. They had saved each other in ways that neither of them could have imagined. When they first met in that concrete kennel at the animal shelter. Now, when other families came to the clinic with difficult pets, Maya would tell them Luna's story. She would explain that behavioral problems are often just trauma responses, that patience can work miracles, and that sometimes the most rewarding relationships require the most work to build. Luna would usually be nearby during these conversations, offering her quiet presence to stressed animals and their worried families. She had become living proof that no animal is truly hopeless, and that love really can conquer fear when it's given enough time and commitment to grow.